Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about 3 steps to pentatonic mastery. So this is a hot topic that I get asked about a lot, and it's a really fun one that I've actually been working on individually one-on-one with a bunch of the more advanced students in my text lessons membership studio. And that is actually just about to hit capacity again. It's been closed for several months, and we're about to close it off once again. So make sure to check that out before it's too late. If you'd like, I would love to work with any of you guys individually if I haven't already. And it's been a really fun monthly membership program where you get all sorts of lesson assignments and practice plans, and you just get to be in touch with me whenever you'd like about whatever you're practicing or any questions that you might have. So today's just going to be a brief overview of each of these steps, and I'm sure you're going to get something out of it. But if you want to go really deep into this concept and also get an accompanying PDF with this, just check out the full masterclass that we just released at jazzlessonvideos.com on this concept of pentatonics. And so this masterclass gives you over an hour of content delving into the concept of pentatonics. Plus, it also comes with a PDF to give a bunch of examples of everything that I'm playing and beyond. That PDF shows pentatonic chord scale relations, a pentatonic harmony graph for substitutions, a bunch of different pentatonic pattern exercises, and a bunch of examples of how to do pentatonic shifting. But again, today we're going to go through 3 different steps that you can use to approach pentatonics and hopefully start to use them more in your playing. All right, so step 1 is going to be understanding pentatonic harmony. That's obviously a crucial first step, and there are 2 parts to that. 1, you want to understand the pentatonic chord scale relations, and 2, you want to understand how you can use pentatonic harmony and superimpose different scales as substitutions over a given chord. So how you can use pentatonic scales as substitutions. So let's start with the pentatonic chord scale relation. So that just means, how does a pentatonic scale line up with a different chord? Now, there are a bunch of different ways that you can do it. We're just going to go over, for now, we're just going to check out the major, minor, and dominant pentatonic scales. If you want to check out the full masterclass, you'll get to see some other more unique pentatonic scales that could be fun to use, as well as some different ways of using it modally. But for now, let's just check out really the most fundamental and important idea with pentatonic chord scale relations, and that is just understanding how a major, dominant, and minor pentatonic scale work. So this will be a simple overview for some of you, but it's very important just to make sure that you've got a handle on this to start. So a major pentatonic scale is just going to be 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 of the major scale. So in other words, we're going to look at the major scale as a reference. Then from there, we're going to use the following scale degrees: 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. That's going to build a major pentatonic scale. Now, if you want to do a dominant pentatonic scale, all you have to do is raise that 6 up to a dominant 7. So now we're really just going to use the Mixolydian scale, which is really our home base for a dominant sound, and we're going to use that as our reference. Then we're going to end up picking the following notes from that Mixolydian scale. We're going to have 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7. Now, some people think of the dominant pentatonic scale as being a mode of a minor 6 pentatonic scale. That can be hip, but for me, I feel like it's really best and the least confusing to just understand the dominant pentatonic scale on its own, and to think about it and how it relates to the Mixolydian scale like we just did. All right, and now finally we've got the minor pentatonic scale. So we're going to look at the reference of a Dorian minor scale, because that is typically what we use as our home base over a minor 7 chord in jazz. And so if we've got our Dorian scale, we're going to pick the notes 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7. in order to build the minor pentatonic scale. Now you may notice that the minor and major pentatonic scales do use the same modal system. So in other words, if you were to start on the second note of the minor pentatonic scale and build the scale from there, you would end up having a major pentatonic in a different key. And it's nice to be aware of that for reference, but really I think it's just more important to understand all these scales and how they function at their own home base. So in other words, you want to understand the major pentatonic scale as its major scale and not as a mode of the minor pentatonic scale or vice versa. All right, so in the full video masterclass, one thing that you'll get from that video and also the supplementary PDF is going to be some cool phrases that you can use for just using the pentatonic sound as an inside device. So there are gonna be a bunch of phrases in there using it just inside on some different vamps and on some 251s, both major and minor 251s. So that's gonna be a really useful resource. So let's actually check out one of the phrases from that video. This is going to be a phrase on a major 251, just using inside pentatonic sounds. And so you'll see in this major 251 phrase, there are 3 different pentatonic scales used. One for the minor 2, one for the dominant 5, and now you'll see there is actually a superimposition or a substitution, however you want to refer to it as, in that last bar. Instead of using C major pentatonic on that C major scale, speaking in my key of B flat, instead, what I ended up doing there was I used an E minor pentatonic over that C major sound, which is a nice way of really accentuating the major 7 and the 9, which is not really the same effect that you get from just the root and the 9 when you're playing a regular pentatonic major scale. So that is one of the options that I go into for some alternative ways that you can use the pentatonic scales and different modes and all sorts of stuff like that for taking different approaches to the pentatonic sound. So with that in mind, let's just check out the first few bars of the pentatonic harmony graph that is in the supplementary PDF and part of what I go through in this full video masterclass. So you'll see what we have here in this pentatonic harmony graph in those first few bars is we've got a D minor 7 all the way through, and then we just look at some different ways that we can play different pentatonics over that D minor 7. So we want to really understand how some options, as you'll see, like in bar 3, actually end up being harmonious because all the notes actually fit into that D minor 7 sound, whereas some of the options, like in bar 2, are going to be very tense because we don't actually share any common notes in the E flat minor pentatonic sound when using it on a D minor 7. In other words, none of the notes from the E flat minor pentatonic sound fit inside the D minor chord scale, which would be D Dorian. There are no common notes there. And so in bar 4, we'll see that if we use F minor over D minor 7, that would be a good example of a substitution that's moderately tense. And so we'll see there, we've got 3 notes in that F minor pentatonic scale that don't really line up with a D minor sound, but we also have 2 notes that do line up very well in D minor. So that's a good example of a pentatonic substitution that is moderately tense. So you want to really get the hang of what your different options are to superimpose different pentatonic scales on a chord. And that's what this harmony graph essentially accomplishes. So if you want to check out that full graph, just check it out in the PDF of the masterclass, of the full masterclass at jazzlessonvideos.com. Okay, so now that we understand some different pentatonic scales that you can use and some ways that we can use them harmonically, then from there, you want to get more flexible with them just from a technical standpoint. And the best way to do that is to just practice some patterns with pentatonics. So obviously, the more patterns that you learn, the more flexible you're going to be with the pentatonic concept. And so sometimes patterns get a bad rap, which I think is actually kind of silly, because what happens is people feel like, oh, if you're practicing lots of patterns, then you're just going to sound mechanical in your playing. Now, the reality is any of the jazz legends that we check out and study all have examples in their work where we can find all sorts of devices that probably, technically speaking, came from patterns. Because the idea is patterns are not something that you just plug into your solos. Patterns are a way of developing flexibility and fluency with a concept. Now, ironically, the more you practice and memorize different patterns, probably the less you're going to use them in a very verbatim way. And so in other words, the more you actually memorize and become flexible with pentatonic patterns, for instance, the more spontaneous and instantaneous you'll be able to be with the concept. Once you get really fluent with some patterns, then you'll start to be able to actually combine different patterns together and throw them into your solos in a way that's very natural, because you're going to be so fluent and flexible with the concept. So with that in mind, let's check out one of the patterns from the supplementary PDF and one of the patterns that I go through in the full masterclass video. This one is particularly great for developing flexibility with pentatonics because what it does is it builds a shape up each degree of the pentatonic scale with kind of a minimal amount of jumping around. There's only one skip just right in the middle of this shape, and then we just build up with that same melodic shape from each degree. So it's kind of a cool way that you can really fly through the pentatonic scale. And you can also turn around that same shape, so we flip it upside down and effectively do that same shape in a descending pattern. So all of that is going to sound like this. And in the full masterclass video and PDF, you'll see some cool different ways of getting more flexible with just playing pentatonics from a rudimentary standpoint, some cool exercises for doing the pentatonics just moving up in half steps, pentatonic chromatic exercises, and an explanation of how you can do that starting from different degrees of the pentatonic scale too. But for now, let's just move forward and talk about pentatonic shifting, because that's a topic that I get asked about a lot. Pentatonic shifting is a really cool way of shifting through a bunch of different tonalities as you're constructing your pentatonic lines. So when you get into pentatonic shifting, you can use different methods for essentially focusing on the way you connect from one pentatonic harmonic territory into another. So it's a way of connecting all these different pentatonic scales in a way that's going to sound really fluid and sensible. And so this concept is going to allow you to use a bunch of different pentatonic sounds in a short period of time in a way that sounds really fun and exciting. One of my favorite methods to use within the concept of pentatonic shifting is going to be shifting with a common tone. So the most straightforward way that you can do that would just be over, for instance, like a minor chord vamp, where you would just shift one bar at a time into different tonalities using a common tone. So let's just take a look at one of the phrases from this supplementary masterclass PDF in order to get a better idea of how we can do this. So one way you can do it is with a consistent pattern. So let's use a pattern somewhat similar to the pattern that we just went over. If we look at this first bar, we're going to see a pattern that's very similar to what we just did. Essentially, it's got that skip in the middle, but at the very end, instead of going down to the original note we started on, we just go back up 1 degree. So then if we were to continue that pattern into the next bar, we would end up landing on F, which is the next degree of the D minor pentatonic scale. In other words, we started the first pattern from D in the beginning of that bar. So if we were to start the same pattern up 1 degree, we would do that from F in the next bar. However, what we're going to do here is we're going to use that F as a common tone to shift into another tonality. So all you have to think about here is there are going to be always 5 options to build a pentatonic scale using any given note. If we're using F, we can build a pentatonic scale from F minor, or G minor, or B flat minor, C minor, or D minor. Now we just came from D minor, so let's use one of those options. Let's go ahead and pick B flat minor. So now with that B flat minor sound, we want to keep the pattern going. So in order to do that, we want to take that same melodic shape. The way that melodic shape worked was we stepped up a degree, then we step up another degree, then we skip up a degree, so we skip past D flat up to E flat. Then we step down a degree, yet another degree, down 1 more degree, and then we step back up. Then from there, we continue the shape, so we step down to A flat. or G sharp, depending on how you want to think about it and harmonically. And from there, we're going to do that same thing. So we're going to use the G sharp or A flat as a common tone and build another pentatonic shape off of one of our 5 options. Now we want to transition to a different sound though, so we're not going to use the B flat minor. So with that in mind, we technically just have 4 options. Our 4 options for that bar will be G sharp or A flat, C sharp minor or D flat minor, E flat minor or D sharp minor, and F minor. So let's just pick that G sharp minor as our next sound. And again, we're going to continue with that same shape. And we can keep on doing that from bar to bar. So if we were to construct an 8-bar phrase, it could look something like this. And again, this is one of the examples of pentatonic shifting that you can find in that supplementary PDF to the full masterclass. So let's see what that sounds like. And so one other practice resource that you will get from that PDF if you want to check it out is some exercises using fill-in graphs. So what that does is it gives you the pentatonic harmony or pentatonic scales that you're going to shift to, but it has you fill in the notes of each bar. So you just get that first note and you fill in from there. It's a really great way of bridging the gap between reading some exercises and actually improvising your own. Just a really great way of getting more flexible with the sound. All right guys, so I hope you enjoyed the video today. If you want to get deeper and more serious into pentatonic sounds and using pentatonics in your playing, just make sure to check out that full video masterclass and the supplementary PDF that comes with it at jazzlessonvideos.com. And again, if you do want to pick that up, just make sure to use code CLB10 for $10 off of that masterclass package. All right, so make sure to click subscribe if you haven't already, and click like if you enjoyed the content, and make sure to leave a comment below. We'd love to get your feedback about what you'd like me to cover in these YouTube videos while I'm just making a little bit more content while I'm off tour right now. All right guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.